like God. Herein, the high creatures behold the imprint of the eternal power, which is the end whereof the aforesaid ordinance is made. In the order whereof I speak, all natures are inclined by different laws, nearer and less near, unto their principle. Wherefore they move to different ports of the great sea of being, each with an instinct given to bear it on. This bears the fire upwards toward the moon. This is the motive force in mortal creatures. This binds together and unites the earth. And not only does this bow shoot those creatures that lack intelligence, but also those that have intellect and love. The providence which ordains all this, with its light makes ever quiet the heaven within which revolves the sphere that has the greatest speed. End quote. Dante's cosmological vision of order, whereby all the entities of creation cohere in a pattern or design of scale values, the hierarchical principle of more and less, depends on the belief that God's providence has imparted every conceivable perfection to things. Providence, in fact, is the explanation of order. This assertion of order is not unwarranted in the Divine Comedy. As a matter of fact, Beatrice's speech on the unity and variety of the cosmos is a recapitulation of views Dante has shared with us all along. When the pilgrim is in limbo, he lists Democritus as the philosopher who ascribes the world to chance. Il mondo a caso pone. Democritus' philosophical conceit, which is linked to Lucretius and Epicurus' dark imaginings, that the universe is made of atoms whirling by chance in a vacuum, forever on the verge of colliding, is acknowledged and quickly dismissed by Dante. Even the representation of the blind, random rotation of fortune in Inferno 7, which triggers the perception of the tragic fall of man into the cycles of time, discloses that the wheel of fortune does not turn haphazardly, but according to God's providential plan. What is unusual in Beatrice's speech is that the universe is shaped according to a criterion of aesthetic order. Ordine and forma, these are the words she uses, which they have to be understood as order and form, of course, but respectively as order, which is beauty, and forma, which is also beauty. At the same time, this order of creation, Beatrice says, is based on the principle of similitude. This is the form that makes the universe like God, she says. In a way, the statement echoes the Neoplatonic doctrine of man as the microcosm reflecting the macrocosm. But Dante, who is always aware that resemblance can be the occasion for error, makes resemblance a category in the perception and knowledge of order. The created world is connected to its creator by the law of analogy of relations. This means that there is no univocal identity between creatures and creator. The resemblance is a vestige, an orma God has impressed on the degrees of creation. In this sense, the order of the universe is embodied by the Platonic idea of the great chain of being, the virtual bond that stretches continuously from the sunlit realm of unity to the dim regions of multiplicity. This Platonic sequence of beings, according to a hierarchy of values, implies that things participate by analogy in the divine essence. More to the point, Beatrice's spatial representation of the material universe is not a frozen, static image of order. On the contrary, the chief feature of her exposition is that it inserts a dynamics within the diversity and gradations of the scheme of creation. All natures, we are told, move to different poles over the great sea of being as the fire goes upwards. The model for this ordered universal motion is, again, St. Augustine's. In Book 13 of the Confessions, St. Augustine focuses on the so-called weight of love, what he calls pondus amoris. the law of spiritual gravity, according to which all things, pulled by their own weight, return to their proper place. St. Augustine writes, our rest is our own place. Love lifts up to it. A body tends to go of its own weight to its own place, not necessarily downward toward the bottom, but to its own place. Fire tends to rise upward. A stone falls downward. Things are moved by their own weight and go toward their proper places. Put these back in order and they will be at rest. My weight is my love. Wherever I'm carried, it is my love that carries me there. By your gift we are set on fire and are carried upward. End quote. St. Augustine's spiritual universe is the displacement of the heart striving to regain its place in the ladder of love. The restless movement of all creatures, which St. Augustine describes through the motion of natural entities, stone falling down, fire going up, cannot be taken in a literal sense, as if the place or inclination to a place by each finite being were naturally predetermined. For St. Augustine, they are metaphors for the spiritual pull of the soul. Dante, who is aware of the implications of optimism and predetermination in the principle of plenitude he sees operating in the cosmos, tempers his own metaphysical optimism. He does so by focusing on the image of the possible reversal of the natural trajectory of fire and by stressing the individual's moral freedom. Man, Beatrice says, can waver, quote, even as a shape often does not accord with the intention of the art, because the material is deaf to respond. So the creature sometimes departs from this course, having the power thus impelled to swerve toward some other part. And even as the fire from a cloud may be seen to fall downwards, so the primal impulse, diverted by false pleasure, is turned toward the earth. End quote. Dante then combines the notion of an eternal, objective, pre-established order of creation independent of the human will, with the sense of man's immanent ethical autonomy. But in a metaphysical scheme, such an ethical, moral autonomy entails the possibility of man's transgression. At the same time, the autonomy has to be absorbed within a larger metaphysics of universal harmony if one is to avoid the rupture, the radical contradiction embodied by man's freedom that potentially distorts and obscures the claim of constitutive order of the cosmos. How does Dante do this? How does he harmonize the two things? The notion of an objective, pre-established order of creation and the claim of independence of the human will. It's within the context of an acknowledgement of man's uniqueness, his potential disharmony and freedom of the imagination, and of the effort to make order more than a mere norm, but a reality in man's experience, that we must view Dante's representation of order as dynamic and not static. This dynamic notion recognizes the dialectical interaction between the exact boundaries and clarity of closed forms, as well as the perfectibility, the as yet incomplete role of finite man, who is also ready to transgress all bounds. From this point of view, Dante's understanding and representation of order echoes the conceptions put forth by the 12th century so-called Chartrians, who describe the shaping of primordial silver, matter, and the actual disfiguration of the natural order, waiting to be restored to a renewed harmony. But the idea of a dynamic order of creation is carried out by Dante by unusual means. There is in Dante theology of power or of force. God, for instance, is the prime mover. He's also acknowledged in Paradise one as valore, which means power. Apollo is addressed in terms of valore. O buon Apollo, all'ultimo lavoro, fammi del tuo valor siffatto vaso. O good Apollo, for this last labor, make me such a vessel of your power. It should be remarked that in Italian, lavoro, meaning labor, the poet's work, is what we call a metathesis of valore, power, as if to suggest that the poetic work is the locus where God's power is transfigured. More substantively, Dante suggests the force operative in the order of creation by the parallel deployment of the Pythagorean theory of the harmonics of the sphere and the metaphysics of light. What are these two things? The theory of the harmonics of the sphere and the metaphysics of light. The Pythagorean and Platonic account of the planetary orchestration caused by the whirling motion of the heavenly spheres according to mathematical ratio is explicitly mentioned in Paradiso 1. Dante says, quando la rota che tu sempiterno desiderato a sé mi fece atteso con l'armonia che temperi e discerni. Paradiso 1, line 76, 79. When the revolution which thou, by being desired, makest eternal, turn my attention unto itself by the harmony which thou dost temper and distinguish, etc. The exordium of Paradiso 1, the very first words of Paradise, the glory of him who moves all, penetrates and shines through the universe more in one part and less elsewhere, announces, along with the Aristotelian notion of God as the prime mover, the Neoplatonic motif of the hierarchical order of the universe according to varying degrees of light and darkness. From the luminosity of the Empyrean to the obscure materiality of the earth, all bodies are ordered according to their degree of participation in the common form of light. But the Neoplatonic assumption of the continuous gradations of light also suggests that light is an activity. It is the principle of action and motion in all things because it's forever capable of propagating itself on all sides. Such a figuration of cosmological, overarching order within which the plurality of forms and beings is contained is translated by Dante into two further questions. One is the question of ethical order. The other is the question of knowledge of order, in the double sense of the phrase. What kind of knowledge is there of order? How can knowledge be ordered? For the second question, I will try to answer the two questions, but for the second question, I would like to look at one specific area of paradise, the heaven of the sun, Paradiso 10 to Paradiso 12. In this heaven of the sun, which is also the heaven of arithmetic, Dante imaginatively reconstitutes the order of the universe and asserts the sovereign rationality of the cosmos. The order here is above all conceptual, in that the order of the cosmos can be known with mathematical clarity and distinction. Appropriately enough, Dante meets in the heaven of the sun the wise spirits who have knowledge of God. Prominent among them are St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Bonaventure, who give a eulogy of, respectively, St. Francis and St. Dominic, and who between them reconcile love and knowledge. But to see how arithmetic, we are in the heaven of the sun and the heaven of arithmetic, which is a branch of theoretical knowledge, shapes the abstract idea of order, one should look at Canto 10 of Paradise, which begins with a contemplation of the Trinity. In translation, the text says, looking upon his Son with the love with which the one and the other eternally breathe forth, the primal and ineffable power, made with such order, all that revolves in mind or space, that he who contemplates it cannot but taste of him. It should be remarked that in numerical symbolism, this is Canto 10 of Paradise, 10 is the number of macrocosmic order because all numbers are included in it. More pressing, however, is the question why Dante should discuss the Trinity in the heaven of arithmetic. Theologians traditionally deploy a Euclidean vocabulary or mathematical language to reflect on the inner relation of the Trinity. God is thought of as the sphera infinita, the infinite intelligible sphere whose center is everywhere and whose circumference nowhere. He is unity and has no plurality, and multiplied by itself is one. But the central reason why arithmetic, which deals with the infinity of numbers and abstract quantity, is yoked to theological discourse depends on the fact that arithmetic is a rigorous science that works by its own principles. By yoking arithmetic to theology, then, theology for Dante is drawn within the confines of scientific discourse. The desire to invest theology